more longer than me. And she knows Ignatius for almost 50 years of her life, etc. So you can just well imagine. So, comrades, we are on him this evening, and I'm sure Ignatius would love to have the DSG and myself and Dobbs and Connie here. Not that I'm leaving Deacon and Jesse out for now, but because we were always day in and day out with this man. But we are on him here this evening, an outstanding company, an outstanding father, an outstanding husband, an outstanding revolutionary. This man, for me anyway, is in the same league as I love Che Guevara and Fidel Castro and Tresani. I love this man in the same particular context. That is what he is for me, a deep thinking human being. And so we are going to start off by introducing Sean Jacobs. First, Sean is lucky that he is the pastor here, but he was also with us during the boycott. So Ignatius was also his leader, even though he's a pastor. So Sean, you can also say that yes, I fought for freedom in this country, but today you are a pastor, and that's why we want you here. Thank you, Sean. Shall we give him a hand, guys?
Good evening, everyone. Welcome all protocol observed this evening. Mr. MC, Program Director, good to have you and see you once again. It's been a long time. Greetings to the family this evening, media and the family and the extended family. I want to extend my sincerest condolences to you this evening. We come a long way. I know many years, and yes, we all went our separate ways, we got married and so on, but it's good to see you here. I want to convey our condolences not only from myself, my wife, and family, but also from our ministry, Living Faith Christian Center, and then also from the board of directors of the Riverlea Christian Empowerment Center. It is my prayer that God will just touch you and that His Holy Spirit will just every single day comfort you during this time. I know that Ignatius died during a very difficult time of lockdown, and we were all cohered with a lot of things. But I pray that some of the blessings in that heart. Amen. I'm going to ask that we just close our eyes as we pray together this evening. And I want to, this evening, just echo the words of the Apostle Paul. He writes in the book of Timothy, 1 Timothy 2, verses 1 to 4. It says, I urge them, first of all, that petitions, prayers, intercession, and thanksgiving be made for all people, for kings, and all those in authority. And I want to add my own words, those in our government, those in authority, the people that are represented here tonight, that they may live a peaceful and quiet lives in all godliness and holiness. This is good and pleases God our Savior, who wants all people to be saved and to come to His knowledge of the truth. So, Father, in the name of Jesus, we stand before you this evening. We thank you for this evening, my God, as we come to celebrate the life, my God. But most of all, this evening, I lift up the family of God that has been through mourning and are still mourning. We think of a husband, a father, a leader in our country, my God. I pray this evening, God, that you will bless them, touch them, my God. Bless this evening, oh God, as we continue to speak about a man that has served his country, that is a man that has served his community, a man that has served his family, that has been ripped away by the death of God. And this evening, oh God, we just want to praise you and honor you and give you all the glory and praise that belongs to you for his life. In Jesus' mighty name. Amen.
Thank you, Sean, for that, or Pastor Jacobs, I should say. I just know him for many years, that's why I call him like that. Comrade, you know, under ordinary circumstances, we should be having this event in the city hall. And as they say in Afrikaans, the city hall so beskikking as ons daar gehad, because comrades should have been singing and chanting. There were about 284 of us in jail together at Sun City, and all those people wanted to be here, and some with their families. So they were fighting with Dobbs and myself to say we are not keeping them informed and we're keeping them away. But of course, as you know, it is the violence that's keeping them away. But of course, this place is also appropriate because Ignatius just didn't live too far from here. A place called Watermack, where he started off, then he moved to Flinders Street, and then he moved again to the upper parts of Riverlea, because the family were Catholics and they didn't want to walk too far from Flinders Street. They wanted to walk to be a bit close. I don't know Cecilia, but I just think that was the case. But anyway, be that as it may, the next person that I need to introduce you is that, so this comrade that I'm introducing you now to is one that thinks he was the first person to sign Amelia, Ignatius, and myself to join MK in the ANC. By this time, Jesse had already started working with us. But his MK was Felix. And in 1981, when he came from Osaka, he came with the mission to build the new structures with South Africa. And in 1982, he got hold of Ignatius and myself, and he thought we were new in these things, but he was shocked to understand that we understand the politics that is taking place here. Because by this time, we already had comments from there, Jesse coming in and having major discussions about looking at these issues. So, Amelia, one of the first commanders of Ignatius in the Congo is Felix. He has been at your house. I don't know if Ignatius has ever introduced him like that, but Deacon will know he's a pastor now, and he's no longer in Angola. And in fact, he was, in my view, going to be the first president of Cycle, which was for us the unveiling of the ANC Youth League in South Africa. But he went into exile in 1984-85, and Peter Mokaba came and became the president of Cycle. So, comrades, can we all welcome Comrade Deacon Martin, Pastor Deacon Martin. Please join us here. Come, Pastor, you are pastor here, you're not an MKK.
Good evening to everybody. First of all, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the Master of the Ceremony. I'm not a feminist, but I started to my favorite. My dear comrades, a very limited young activist we met many years ago in the Western Cape, and also Comrade Ignatius. I'd like to thank you for the good work you've done concerning Comrade Nash. Our DSG, Comrade Ignatius, my old friend and comrades. It's really great to see you tonight. The Honorable Comrade, it's such a pleasure to see you, man. Thank you so much. I'd like to thank everyone who's here. First of all, I take my greetings to the family, my sister, Comrade Ignatius. The pain will never just go away as yet. You have lost a great friend, you lost a great man in your life, a husband, a wonderful person, a hardworking man, very thoughtful, very thoughtful. But also for us, two daughters and a son, and a friend, a child, and a son-in-law, a philosopher, an amazing man of knowledge. I'm not going to give a speech, but I just want to put a few reminders around who congregations, because we've got speakers for tonight who are going to speak about congregation. But before I do that, I just want to say maybe a word of consolation for the family. And I'm going to be very brief, I'm not going to be long. Just want to read from the book of Psalms, chapter 14, verse 1 to 3, very short. Because I know there is pain in our hearts. We might be terribly strong. You know, when my son spoke today at the graveside, you know, I could hear the pain in my heart and I could feel my tears really wanted to come out. You know, I was broken actually. Because I never known for Comrade Ignatius. We're very close. I'm not just a distant friend or a distant company. I was closely connected. Of course, there's a time when I was absent where I never had the opportunity to be close to you. At the time of your marriage, and the time when you took the brother, because I was checking the Bible. So from the book of Psalms, chapter 14, maybe before I do that, I would just appreciate what Pastor Sean has done. Pastor Sean, thank you very much for the way of wisdom. The call by Apostle Paul, who was the apostle of Jesus Christ, a great man who took the word of God across the boundaries of many countries. I just want to read from the book of Psalm 14. It says, I waited patiently for the Lord, he turned to me and heard my cry. He lifted me out of the slimy pit, out of the mud and men. He set my feet on a rock and gave me a firm place to stand. My sister, every call I'll make to you and to your kids, anytime from today on, is going to be about the word of God, because I don't listen to console. There's no man who can console. But the Spirit of the Most High God is the one which will console you and bring solace to your heart and your children. You will never forget about that. But at least you remember him to be a man who read his words and a very successful. He did his part. He might have left a little bit earlier than we expected. But you know, for that period, which God had given to me here on earth, he has done his part. Amen. I just want to make some few remarks here about condemnation. I'm not going to make a speech. What I must say is that it's not easy to talk about condemnation because he was a great man, man of honor. Condemnation was very remarkable. The first time I met him was when we met in Riverlea. I came here. I was underground. I was doing AC underground work. On my relation from my mind, I spent time with other leaders of the ANC, playing very hard how good the techniques are. A lot of consultation with the SACA, the Political Military Council, a lot of other comrades who are now gone and they are not alive anymore. Congratulations going to join in the realm of the kingdom of God. Now, I was amazed to meet Comrade Ignatius, who actually introduced me to Comrade Ignatius last. When I met him, because I was introduced to him at a distance by someone. And when I started speaking to him about COSAS and his responsibilities regarding what he had to do to build COSAS in the Riverlea area, not only here, but all area of so-called characters, combination was extremely ready and prepared to move to a position of leadership. He displayed great leadership skills. He displayed the quality of a revolutionary. And immediately for me, it became a great candidate for military training because we knew that whatever we do, because the time was past where we then have to just do political work and separate it from the military underground work. So that's the combination of all these pillars of the flag. You can tell me that the mayor is not taking care of his people. You'll be lying because so you can see for yourself, he's taking care of the church and the pastor. You know, we'll pray for you. My comrade, thank you so much. Bless you. So, Comrade Ignatius was immediately a candidate for military training. So there was no waste of time. So the plan was to take him out of the country quickly and bring him back like I did when I came back from Riverlea. Because I spent time there. When I came out, the plan was they were building a new revolutionary movement, progressive, going straight to be part and parcel of the whole movement. And the problem was to take people out of the country, train them and bring them back. Because I worked in almost all these areas. I worked in the camp, I worked in Lusaka, at the political military camps and level, our very senior level actually, where we're taking decisions about who goes into the country, where and what, with what and with who. But also work in areas like Livingston, where there was a crossing point, the very sensitive place where the SPA was not very far from us, crossing into Luthuli coming to South. That route is very long. So, but fortunately, we decided, and we agreed that we need to train people inside the country. So, Comrade Ignatius was the first person, one of the first people, the first group of youth leaders who were trained inside the country. And Comrade Ignatius was trained in Jordan, we had a very special underground military base, just meters beyond Winterfell. It was in a bush. He was trained there. And of course, you know, it's exciting for you to have a gun when you come back from military training. You also want to tell your girlfriend that you see. And Jordan was the man, but we have Alexander Bailey and Vance, Jerusalem. So what he did, which made and brought a lot of commitment amongst those comrades, more than 100 people, was that immediately after military training, we took him to a target in the evening. It was 3 days of military training, take it to a target, we hit the target together, and some people in the opposition died. When they died, and I'm not talking about the DA in this case, I'm not talking about other political parties, I'm talking about BPs and police and soldiers and targets of the South African Defense Force and so on. So when we have attacked, we know we all have a common commitment. We've executed a military mission in West Africa, and the target was successfully programmed. So in short, there is commitment because everything now is written in the plan. So that brought a lot of serious underground principles, including high levels of secrecy, not just confidentiality, but secrecy. To an extent that we started now beginning to go out because the unit was growing out, and I was both responsible to build the progressive movement in the form of cycle, but we started with the National Youth Organization. And when we built it up and we came to Riverlea, when Riverlea Youth Congress, in Soweto Community take care Soweto Congress, in Alexandra and so forth, Comrade Banda and so forth. And all of our comrades in the Eastern Cape, Comrade Donovan and Comrade Michael C. in PE, in the Western Cape, Comrade Ryan October, you know, in Paris, Comrade Liz Mahashu, you know. So the whole of our comrades, we built a very strong organization of youth who were trained, not just in political field, dialectical materialism, historical materialism, but we're also trained in human sciences. We're trained in picking up and knowing leadership qualities. But having said all that, Comrade was elected for even further sensitive military operations. Now, there was a time when we had a young group of guys who we trained in the same place. There were 12. And we took them to a place where police were full like here, you know, as you see. And this comrade came in there and they just shot at these cops. And a lot of cops died. A lot were remained and so forth and so forth. Now, what happened subsequent to that is that these comrades, unfortunately, were apprehended by the police. They were all taken in. Why? Because one of them had a bullet hitting his shoulder. Because of the blood samples, they managed to find out exactly who that was. So they managed to get the whole unit, all right, except for myself and another comrade who had a little bit of a higher command structure. They couldn't find that unit. But knowing very well that this comrade is now, we're going to handle this news. Now, commitment became very important in this case. I don't know whether you find a bus for us. We stole a bus somewhere. So if there's anyone who lost a bus around that time, we can talk about it. We will find a way of compensating. So that bus was used to take the comrades out of prison. So we communicated a message at one point prison in Pretoria. But the special branch found the message in the ship. Okay? And then they could not interpret it, but immediately they swiftly moved all those detailed comrades of MK to a present in Morabi. Now, what those comrades were there with planning to go and execute a very swift and high-level operation to take them out. So Lusaka reinforced us with the resources we needed. We bought them Kumbi from somebody, and it was fixed nicely for it to be bigger. So the Kumbi was bigger. So we went in there, middle day, 1 o'clock. When we went in there, Comrade Endupa, myself, another comrade who's leaving now, unfortunately, Comrade Short. Now, the guy was having a Kumbi, Comrade Fish, did not make it on time with the Kumbi. So you see now, time management is very important. So we went into prison. I was very beautiful. All right? I knocked on the door, the prison was open. When it opened, I took out my AK-47 and hit him with it on the chest, and he fell down. And, you know, there was no reason to rest him because the guy was already overpowered. So when we took the keys, once they killed us, we took out all those keys. Except for two who decided not to come out. And comrades, unfortunately, we can't talk about it. It's a very sensitive. But those two comrades did not make it. Then we brought out another 11. So the other two was about 10. And we reached 10 to a place called Limpopo today, where Comrade Ignatius, his uncle was a pastor in a church which had a basement, a sort of an underground basement place. It was where we stayed for 2 weeks, you know, making sure that that place, cops don't come closer to, you know, we're around to the TV, bazookas, and all this. You can imagine now, these things were happening here in the country. A lot of people don't understand why we have that vibrant youth leadership. Such a leadership was very vibrant, and the reason for that is that it was an organization which today we are faced with problems. Our youth movement does not necessarily represent those ideas. Our youth movement needs to be reorganized. But not only that, this country where we are right now, we're in a state which is unfortunately very, very difficult. We need to turn things around as quick as we can. We challenge our townships in a space where people don't have hope anymore. That will there ever be economic transformation for the people of this country? Will there ever be people's democracy? Because we're talking about people's democracy. We're not talking about any other democracy. You might tell me bourgeois democracy, but we were talking about a revolutionary democracy. And this is the knowledge which all of us who are sitting here, we're members of the youth. And I was listening to Comrade Ignatius speaking, giving a very beautiful speech during the day. And I was amazed about her resolute memory of all those activities which we undertook. Her and Comrade Phoebe were some of the very few women who stood very strong behind Cycle, and they supported every person who was in there. And I remember Comrade Peter Mukaba was in Limpopo after he was released from prison, and I went to take him from there to bring him to a meeting. And I thought I would just bring a very good comrade who is a great singer and so on and so forth. And when I arrived here, charismatically, he was singing, and also he was sending fire out, and you could see the leadership skill in him, and immediately became part and parcel of the big organization. And we built that organization to stand the time of times. And I can tell you, all the members of that organization are a totally different quality of people today compared to a lot of other people in this country. Now, I think, and that is my assumption, that even when the ANC was established in 2012, sorry, yeah. By the pulpit. Okay, so I'm working, it's working reverse, I'm working forward, I'm going forward, it's going this way. So, Comrade Nash was a resemblance of that character of people. Now, the identity I'm talking about is about where we come from. We had in Africa 400 years slavery, where white imperialist countries, especially Europe and America, were taking black people from the continent, and I'm talking from the Cape, up to the far north of Africa, taken out of this continent into slavery, into bondage. And people were actually washed in the zoo in some of the places in England and so forth. Why? Because white people have never seen a black person. And our people were put on display. Most of them naked. Most of the men who were there were castrated. Why? Because the white imperialist powers didn't want black men to produce their own kids. All right? So Africa became an extended power of those imperialist countries. Now, there's a reason why I'm talking about this identity. There's a huge pain amongst us as South Africans. And of course, I'm talking about the entire continent, but in particular, we South Africans, there's a huge pain. Yes. There's a void in our hearts, there's a pain in our hearts. We know where we're coming from. It has been a very painful place where we passed through, where our generations which came before us passed through. So today, we need to go back and re-identify ourselves as to who we are, so that we are able to bring values of a better society up front to our people, so that we may be able to deal with some of the challenges which we have right now. Most of the African states still pay fees to the European colonial powers. And we cannot afford to go that route. We cannot afford to have that Comrade DSG. We need to find a way of bringing that to an end, because this perpetuates a dependency on the European countries. Every resource we take here, we're taking it out to China and other places. And not because we don't want to sell our products, we want to, but there is a system which has been there for more than 400 years. Comrade DSG, we need to now bring the system to an end. And we need to use the African National Congress as a revolutionary organization, the party of the people, to turn things around. Our youth don't have faith and hope anymore. our women are raped every day because they are raped by men and young people. And these people who rape them because they've lost confidence in the system, not in the ideals of their great-grandfathers, but they don't see sustainability in what we're doing. So my appeal this evening, ladies and gentlemen, and the Jacobs family and my fellow leaders who are sitting here in front, we need to do a redefinition of our identity, and I think that's very important. That might help us to change things in the right direction. And we want to put claims against the British government to pay our people for slavery. You know, the European countries who took people here and they took resources, they used a lot of people who were staying in the front coastal towns of Africa to go into the hinterland, to go and take slaves and take them out to those places. And they took ivory, they took gold, they took silver, and so forth. But I'm not here for a political speech. I just wanted to remind you who you are. Jesus' mighty name. Thank you.
Thank you, Comrade Deacon. I think the next person that was supposed to come on here was from the PEC in Gauteng. As you all know, Nash was a long-serving member of the PEC in Gauteng, but you also know they had a long meeting today, which we all support and applaud for those gallant people within the ANC that want to eliminate fraud and corruption. And that took a long time, and so people had other commitments. And we're still hoping that they will come. But I do think Comrade DSG and Phoebe, I'll call on Phoebe now to come and deal with the rest of the other people. I also want to just welcome the mayor here, the mayor of Joburg. And as you, yeah. This mayor of Joburg here, Riverlea, we'll call him at 6 o'clock in the morning, and he'll be here sorting out drain blockages and so on. So I love this township just as much as he loves this township. So we thank the mayor for loving Riverlea so much. But he will have his chance. Ignatius were in the leadership of the ANC Youth League together for many years, besides the fact that they've known each other. And in fact, she is from the headquarters now, and she will take over the process and introduce the other people. Once the PEC members will be here, we will call the PEC member of the ANC in Gauteng and continue. Or the mayor will have to speak on their behalf, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. Phoebe?
Good evening, comrades. Good evening, Amelia and the children, comrades DSG, Comrade Meyer, Comrade Alvin Botas, a member of the NEC and Deputy Minister. I see Comrade Jesse Maluleke here, I see Donnie Naddison, I see Justin De Alande, and quite a number of other comrades that serve with Comrade Ignatius. The main purpose of our coming here tonight is the first inaugural Ignatius Jacobs Memorial Lecture. And we want to make it an annual event where we reflect on the values, the history, the issues that Ignatius held dear to his heart. Not just about the liberation of his people, but also the emancipation of his people socially, economically, and in all kinds of aspects. Comrade Deacon spoke about the fact that Ignatius was an internationalist. He was a Pan-African. And the memorial service and the memorial lecture series that we're starting this year is a way of reflecting on all of those issues which Ignatius stood for. Comrade Patrick said that I served with Comrade Ignatius firstly in the NEC of the South African Youth Congress in 1990, and then later in the NEC of the Youth League when Ignatius served as a treasurer. But I actually met Ignatius before then. When I came to University of Western Cape in 1985, Ignatius has already left then, but whenever there is talked about, ASASO and the SRC, then this name kept on coming up. Where people talking about Nash used to do this, and Nash used to say this, etc. So that's where I first heard about this person, and then when I got involved in the youth movement, in the student movement, I eventually met Ignatius, and Comrade Ignatius this morning spoke about the underground launch of the South African Youth Congress in 1987 at UWC. I was at the SRC at the time, and we had to launch CYCO under conditions of illegality. And what happened was that the message was set out that the launch is going to happen in Durban, and in the meantime, we're organizing it at UWC in Cape Town. So we hoped that the security police was focusing on Durban as the possible venue, and meantime, it happened in the Western Cape, at the University of Western Cape. And very close working together with Comrade Rapu, Comrade Ignatius, and other comrades that were part of that that early contingent that looked at the launching of the South African Youth Congress. Ignatius has been part of many organizations. We heard about his time as an organizer in COSAS, the Congress of South African Youth, South African Students. We heard about his leadership role in the Southern Transvaal Youth Congress, the Riverlea Youth Congress, in SACO, in the UDF, in a whole range of different organizations. Now, the main purpose is to hear the memorial lecture from the DSG, but what we also wanted to do was to just get a few messages from comrades that represent the broad spectrum of organizations that Ignatius has been part of. And we're going to start off by a message from someone that worked with Ignatius for a long time as well. Ignatius was part of, as we knew, during the late 1980s, the state of the emergency was first declared in 1985, July 1985. And what we saw is that layers and layers of leadership of the youth congresses, of the UDF were removed, put in detention, had to go into exile, were restricted. And Ignatius were part of those generation of people that began, that filled that gap when that first layer of comrades of the deacons and Peter Mokabo and Rapu were removed. He stepped in together with other comrades, and then he got into detention, etc., etc. But we're going to start with a message from Comrade Rapu Molokwane, who was the Secretary General of the South African Youth Congress. He was the Secretary General of the ANC Youth League. He's at the moment the South African Ambassador to Austria, and he has recorded a message that we're going to play now. Thank you very much, comrades. Do we have sound?
The family of Comrade Nash, comrades and friends. We gather once again to remember and get inspiration from the life and times of one of the sharp minds of the revolutionary struggle, Comrade Ignatius Jacobs, who to many of us we just call him Nash. A very brave, very honest and engaging activist and leader of our times. A comrade you could trust and put your faith in believing, as we did, that you will not betray, sell, or even speak the pain that was meant to advance the cause of the oppressed and exploited masses of our people. rising from the ranks of the students and youth movements of what Comrade President Oliver Tambo termed the young lions in the fields that to be tested will be a decade of freedom. Nash was up to the task and did not disappoint. Nash rose from within the ranks to become the first holder at those very difficult times when the banking system could not accommodate unexplained cash. He had to find innovative ways of raising large sums of cash and also dispensing throughout the country to advance the revolution, but also to keep those tax and imply that this cash was properly utilized and accounted for. As a cash holder, we had to find the cash first and ensure that it is safe and it reaches the correct beneficiaries. Is accounted for with real tangible results. Now, with evidence of receipts, which is propaganda material produced or any or delegates crossing the border, as we used for those that had to leave the country. Nash believed that comrades are inherently honest, especially those that have undergone rigorous political education training and have been tempered in the trenches of struggle. He was convinced, as many of us were, that our recruits and members did not have the capacity of betraying the cause we have voluntarily joined, yet he was mindful that the enemy was also involved in active, corrupt, and manipulate, as well as create moves within our ranks. That is why, for me, political education was important, and the only shield here against infiltration. Nash was not naive, that people can be turncoats, and that not all those singing and shouting the loudest were genuine revolutionaries. We warned that we must always look out for urgent provocateurs and where necessary to leave them harshly. And we did not hesitate once we had all the information on how to deal with the agents of freedom. As we remember Nash today, and commit to always uphold this example, we are all upon to have the very serious look at what has gone wrong within our movement and how we can rectify and rebuild the movement. To fix it for, make it fit for purpose. We hope that the efforts that the leadership is putting in exposing and getting rid of what happens amongst us will lead to the more in the building, but also raising the movement to reconnect ourselves with the people and win their trust once again. Let me conclude by recording that one of the major tasks of this renewal is to build the ANC youth league and restore it to its glory. Because the ANC cannot exist as a democratic party, as a strong, without a strong, vibrant, and autonomous youth league. The ANC will die in the morning like a tree that is not nourished or getting adequate manure, if the air is moving, it's not revived. Once again, thank you. Long live the AC, long live the spirit of Comrade Ignatius. Manda.
Thank you very much, comrades. I think that those reflections on who Comrade Ignatius Jacobs was and the role that he played, and some of his key thoughts, because Ignatius was always a very independent thinker. He always had his own views on things and were never scared to express them, no matter where he found himself. Our next speaker is going to be Comrade, a representative from the family, Comrade Lawrence Jacobs, who not only represents the family, but also represents a lifetime of struggle. So we now call on Comrade Lawrence Jacobs to deliver the message on behalf of the family.
Amanda! Long live the spirit of Comrade Nash, long live. Comrade PB, Comrade GM, the Honorable Comrade DSG, Jesse Duarte, and I must, who's part of this family. Always say it, come along. Honorable Patrick Klaas, one of our brothers in another house, slept in the house, and not known by many people. The Honorable Mayor and myself in the same branch many moons ago. Comrade Mayor, it's nice to meet you again. Comrades, and I also want to acknowledge, I had a chat earlier with Comrade Shan from the Ahmed Katrada Foundation. Comrade Shan, you are welcome. Family, friends, it certainly gives me a great honor to speak about our brother, to speak about our father, our husband, our comrade, and our friend. Now, Ignatius grew up in a family of 12 with our dad and mom. So you can imagine what a big family we were. But a family that grew up under a very strict and disciplinarian dad, well, both our parents. But I can say here to you today, Nash feared no one except one person, and that was A.B. Jacobs. Now, our dad did not take nonsense from no one, and I promise you, you can ask any of the brothers and sisters. My wife, Helene, and Amelia were scared of him. But he was the type of person that instilled discipline into the family, and he always believed that where his children go, they must represent the Jacobs family with dignity and with respect. And that's how we grew up. Nash was born, and maybe also not known to many people, in Soweto at the Krasani Periguana Hospital. And like I said, in this family, in this small house in Worcester, where it was a privilege to sleep under the table and book the table as a spot to sleep. Can you imagine where we all had to sleep? Just start thinking, the parents in one bedroom and the rest of the house. But I'm not going to dwell too much on that because it made us strong, it made us brave. But what was more important was that Ignatius accompanied me
At the young age of 13 years, turning 14, we were called to a meeting by a fiery activist himself, an activist in his own right, very outspoken critic against the apartheid government then, but had his own challenges, was a Mr. Ralph Pepper. People from Riverlea would know him very well, and a Mr. Jivan. And Mr. Pepper had asked me at church, because he was also a choir master like my dad, like our dad, and asked me to organize youth because he wanted to get the youth involved in some activities. And as many of you would know, I was riddled with gangsterism. Now, maybe we were fortunate in the sense that Nash and myself grew up with elder brothers, 3 of them, who themselves took no nonsense. They were not cases, but no one dared touch any of their siblings. I promise you, it was a joy walking around with them. At that particular meeting, now this was the strangest part of all, we were just listening, we were all there, listening to what Mr. Pepe and Mr. Giovanni had to say. And when he asked any questions, the first question that was raised by Nash. And he wanted to know, what are we going to do about Comrade? And I'll never forget, he raised 2 comrades. He said, what are we going to do about Comrade Nelson Mandela, the release of Comrade Nelson Mandela and Comrade Walter Sisulu? At the age of 30, and that was the question. But nonetheless, the seed was planted, the first seed was planted. Needless to say, he never turned back. That was the start of a long, hard political fight. He was an ardent soccer lover and, may I add, soccer player. Now, the 2 of us used to go every Saturday. We used to play for Koreti church soccer team that was started by Father Makala, the late Father Makala. And every Saturday we would pick up one of our friends, Mark Thomas, and the 3 of us would walk to Bosman. We didn't hike, we didn't need a lift. Walking from Riverlea to Bosman was every Saturday morning. At a young age, he was but 8, 9, and later on Patrick joined us as well, and we walked to the Bosman fields. The rest is history. Riverlea became one of the most successful amateur teams, and just because of boardroom politics, we did not get into the professional league at that time. But we were also fortunate to have a family who loved the sports, because our dad was a sportsman, he loved the sports. So all of us, the elder brothers, started playing soccer, and we followed suit at a very young age. And because we also had a family who supported, the majority who supported Orlando Pirates, and 1 or 2 brothers who supported Kaizer Chiefs. So you can imagine we always had the upper hand. So we were fortunate also that Gabriel was a Pirate supporter, took us to our first soccer derby at Orlando Stadium. What a joy. I mean, we never slept that entire weekend. Couldn't wait to get to school to tell our friends about that occasion. And then I want to share with you something that I know some people, close friends of Nash, knows about. But besides the fact that he loved his family, that he would sacrifice and really, I can tell you, he would kill for his family. Nash, and I was trying to correct Patrick earlier when he said, I said, don't you ever dare think that you know Amelia longer than Nash. That you know Nash longer than Amelia. It's by no coincidence that the 2 of them got married. Our mom was Amelia's godmother. How's that? And to crown it all, they attended school together in the same class from grade 1. So this marriage was made. It was one of those where you were booked. So my mom had booked Amelia already, and it was already a foregone conclusion that the 2 of them would get married. And when Nash went to university, lo and behold, Amelia followed suit, went to Tygerberg. So she dared not leave him alone. The rest is history. If you look at them, they beautiful kids. Kaylee, Ernesto, and Livy. And then, of course, the family grew with Kaylee marrying Craig, and then his grandson, Guy Ignatius, we loved to pieces and adored. Now, you would not touch his family. He was jealous of his family. He protected his family. And yes, they knew they had to share with many organizations. But he made time for them when it was necessary. Now, he was extremely hardworking, as correctly pointed out by so many people. And what a brain, what a strategic thinker. So when we as a family would have our first Sundays, something started about our late dad, who insisted and instructed us to come to the family house every first Sunday of the month. Bring your pots, and we would all have lunch. Well, at the beginning, my mom would just simply cook, and we would all just rock up there and eat. And you would not take no for an answer. You had to be there, or you must have a damn good excuse why you did not attend the first Sunday. That practice still exists today. Today we take our pots, whoever can make it for the first Sunday, and we still go to our parental home in Riverlea. And we can chat and talk to each other and share some moments or issues that where people needed some help. Nash cared about his siblings a great deal. He loved us all the same way. He was always on hand to assist. And we all fondly refer to him as the peacemaker in the family. Now, very few would understand that. Here was this fiery fighter, this person who feared no one. And he would take you to task if you had done something wrong. But believe you me, he was the peacemaker in this family. And when we had to go at each other at times, he would always come in his very humble way. And when we leave there that evening, we would all leave very happy after being together. So at the beginning, he obviously was not around much to be part of that setup. After he got heavily involved in politics. But he made a point of if he did not make lunch, he would be there late afternoon for tea. But he tried all his best to be there as often as possible. But his siblings could call on him anytime. If any one of them had any challenge, any problem, he was available to listen. He was available to give advice, and where he could, he even went as far, and he would assist financially if one of the siblings or anyone had any challenge. And I want to say that he done this to the community of Riverlea, to many people who just knock on the door on numerous occasions and ask for assistance. He never said no to anyone. I have never ever seen or heard my brother say no to anyone. And his family can attest to that. He did not tell anyone. He had an ear and listened to every single person. We had people coming to the house, both at his own place, to the family, not in a good state of mind. And sometimes we would get upset and try and get people away. And we always said, no, just leave them. Don't get upset with them. There's a reason why they're in this state. And he would go out, and he always made you think. He always had an answer why someone is behaving in a certain way. So we will always remember that as a family. But I want to say to you that some of the brothers and sisters just gave me a few messages that they wanted me to, and there's so much one can say about Nash family man, irrespective of the fact that we had shared with many other organizations. Our eldest brother, Dickie, said, Ignatius, you made it possible for me to have my first flight at the age of 68. at the age of 68. He put our brother and his wife on a plane to Port Elizabeth to visit my sister-in-law's sister. Our eldest brother is 72 today. Our other sister Cecilia said, and wrote a long message, and I was glad they could air it today. They gave some interviews. She said, but you kept on telling us you were fine. You told me to be strong, and now I realize why. I was shattered and heartbroken when I received your news. Our other sibling, Dorothy, revered him as a true brother, a great man, named after a great saint, Ignatius of Loyola. You put up a good fight, brother, and led by example. You achieved so many things and worked very hard for you. We saw you put up the greatest fight ever. His nephew Patrick remembers him as humble, courageous, and inspirational person. His brother-in-law Neil remembers him as a humble, kind, and loving person. Now, I must share with you, and I think Amelia would not mind, when Nash was diagnosed with cancer, Amelia himself called me, and we sat down, and I was the first one besides the family. They shared with me the news and asked me to gradually inform the family. Because in our family, and the two of us, even when I was in education, in the Progressive Teachers Union then, I was always a junior to him in politics. And although I served on the executive of many organizations, I was always his junior in politics. And he would remind me and say, at home, you're my boss. But in politics, I'm your boss. And I accepted that because that was the truth. And I learned a great deal from him. But the two of us cared about each other. We shared so many things. And Comrade Deacon, I hope you don't mind if I even share with the people. I shared this with my family. My wife didn't even know. I said Comrade Deacon was one of those. They brought MK members to our house when he was still in energy. And we housed him. I was speaking to Comrade Patrick early on how I guarded weapons on their behalf on many occasions. And I was lucky the one day when they arrested me, I had the advice center's bucky. We had just dropped off weapons. But that was part of the task that he gave me. I had no choice. I was instructed to do so. So our families, it's by no coincidence, because of our closeness, that our kids also very close. Laurent and Dylan and Ernesto and Lavi, very close and still are today. And I'm all very grateful that they are the way we were. I want to remember Nesh as a humble, kind, and loving person. He was my friend, he was my comrade, and my advisor. We shared many memories, walked many miles, and fought many battles together. And like I said, our children share the same bond the two of us had. I walk tall and proud when people talk and reminisce about his achievements. His great strategic mind, his selfless act, and his hard work. Now you heard this morning, he would not leave the Luthuli house until he has seen every single person who had queued outside who wanted to see. He would not leave and say, can I see you guys tomorrow or on Monday? He would make a point of listening to each and every one who wanted to ask for some advice or speak to him. He fought against racial inequalities. He was an icon, a real icon of non-racism. Society has lost a great leader who cared about his country and his people. Ambagatre, our brother, our friend, our comrade, and our peacemaker. Amandla!
Thank you very much for that tribute. I think that it gave us an insight into both his personal family, but also his a continuation of Nash as the political animal. As I was listening, I was just thinking about my experience of Ignatius as a treasurer. Now, Ignatius, and I'm sure Comrade Deacon and Comrade Justin know about this, that Ignatius served as treasurer of Psycho, he deputized Bachana Pena, and then he was elected in 1991 as treasurer of the ANC Youth League until 1994. And Ignatius was very frugal with the organizational money. The poor spoke about it this morning, about his honesty, about how he made sure that the organization's money was managed properly. And he used to, discuss with comrades when comrades come in and say that, can you rent us a car? And he'd say, no, but why can't you take a taxi to Soweto? Or to Nelspruit? Why do you want us to rent you a car? There's a taxi that will take you in half a day. But for other things, we knew that Ignatius will always find the money. The poor mentioned the fact if there's a problem, if there's a program for Ignatius will find the money. I, at some point, was deputy to Comrade Ifnkwe in the portfolio of political education. When there's a political education program and a leadership development program that aimed at sharpening the ideological development, the leadership development of our branches and regions and provinces, Ignatius would find the money. And one of the things that Ignatius has done, and I remember the debate in the NWC first and then in the NEC of the Youth League at the time, Ignatius wanted us 1993, 1994 to start doing annual audits. And we said, but Ignatius, how are we going to explain where we get the money? Because remember, this was before 1994. We don't have a bank account. How are you going to audit, our books? I mean, we know that we can account for it, but just think it through. And Ignatius would give a long explanation about why we must move with the time. We're moving towards a democracy. We must modernize our operations. Our organization need to be at the cutting edge of the developments in the country. And that's the kind of person that Ignatius was, always forward-thinking, always someone that knows what are the priorities that you need to invest in. Invest in people, invest in the development of the young people that he was a leader of. One of the organizations that Ignatius played a role in as one of the, I believe, founder members, he served on the board, was the Ahmed Katrada Foundation. And we're now going to call on Comrade Sean Bolton, who has known Nash even before they served together in this foundation, to come and give a message on behalf of the foundation and also give us a little bit of a window into Ignatius' contribution towards the foundation and also his knowledge of him. Comrade Sean Bolton, who's the Executive Director or the CEO of the Katrada Foundation. Comrade Sean.
Amandla, comrade. Greetings to all of you, Amelia, children, all Nash's family. DSG, Mayor, Pat. When I got the news, it was, I just couldn't believe this. And I immediately sent a message to Comrade Jesse to say, today I feel as if I lost a brother. And that's how I felt. And it's not as if we were in daily contact, but there was a bond of thought, of practice, and the two anecdotes that I will share
will explain that kind of bond. Nash was one of the people that Comrade Kathrada approached when he had this idea of the foundation, and he immediately accepted to be a trustee. Because the one thing that he was fervent about was the issue of building a non-religion. Not the kind that the DA talks about, but a kind that said whether you were Indian, colored, white, and so forth, you needed to immerse yourself in the struggle for equality of the majority of people in this country. And when I read all of the tributes about how he traveled all over the country, stayed in all kinds of places just to pursue that particular objective, it made me understand why he accepted to come onto a foundation whose core objective is to enhance the understanding and practice of non-racialism in this country. Nash served on our board until 2015, when he decided that his work at Luthuli House and so forth didn't allow him to do justice to his work in the foundation. But 2 years later, he then sent a message to me to say, look, I really want you to make sure that I receive all of the communication of the foundation. Because even if I'm not a board member, I still want to make my own contribution. And we continued this discussion in the 3 or 4 times that we met just in the weeks and months prior to his death. So it has been and will be for a long while, I think, something that I doubt I will get over. But I want to share just 2 anecdotes. In 1998, I was the provincial coordinator of the ANC's elections in Gauteng. And it was a marvel watching Nash work elections. As a communications officer, as a spin doctor, there were very few who could match him. To simplify the most complex things, to make sure that the messaging was right, but then to work the journalist to make sure that the story was going to be carried in a way that was not distorted. There are very few people that I have come across since who was such an effective communicator as Nash was. But during that campaign, 23rd of September in particular, my wife, today partner at the time, we were coming back from an elections in Basel, Indonesia. And stupidly, I stopped for what was a blue lights, only to find that it wasn't people in blue lights. They bundled the 2 of us out, took us to some industrial park in Mansfield, took her away, raped her, brought us back, and for some reason left us home for about 20 minutes, and we managed to escape. Nash was comforting during that period like nobody else. Not only to me, but to Leola Moore in particular. And he said to me, you know, this is going to take a long time. You're not going to be the same afterwards, the 2 of you. So think about what you want to do. I didn't understand that it would take probably 8 to 10 years to eventually be able to venture out at night. And that's really what he did. But he made sure that there was, without formal counseling for both of us, was a daily presence in that elections campaign office to, when we couldn't take it, he was there to see us through it. Very few people knew what he was doing. But Nash, towards the end of the campaign, said, well, what are you going to do after this? You've given up your job as a councillor in Joburg. What do you want to do? I said, look, I'm not sure. I've been fired as a teacher. I've left my job as a counselor, so I'll see when the campaign is over. And he says to me, you know, there's a deputy director post coming up in the previous office. So when Shiloah goes in, we think you must go there as a deputy director. I said, Nash, well, what does a deputy director do? I have no understanding of the public service. He said, don't worry, it's a deputy director post. You figure it out. It's not rocket science. And lo and behold, by December of that year, I go through the interviewing process, I get appointed. He forgot to say there's a general. It's a deputy director general post. Now that is the second highest level post in the provincial government. Conveniently forgot to mention that this thing here means that by the 31st of December of that year, the DG is on leave. I have to make decisions about Y2K. I have no clue what this is about. But he's a reference point. And I think that that's the kind of person, if you have the potential, I'm going to throw you into the deep end. I know you're going to survive. Very few people will take those kinds of chances. But Ignatius did on me, and I hugely appreciate that 10-year stint as a public servant, and I owe it to him. But there was an integrity about Ignatius that many people said to me, you know, this chap is on the take as the MEC for transport and all kinds of stuff. One day I went to Nash and we had that kind of relationship. I said, look, bro, here is the story. Are you clean? He said, Sean, I can make my bank account details to you. I can show you everything that is here. There is no reason for me to want to be on the take. There was a huge shopping center development in Lens called Trade Routes. The developers had all kinds of problems with the transport department. I then brought the developers to meet with Nash, and he cleared their obstacles with the officials because they were being unnecessarily problematic. He saved those developers up to about 15 million. And they said to me, well, you know, is there anything that he wants? No, I think he understands the importance that this development will have for the deep south of Johannesburg. Because we had struggled for over 15 years to attract investment into the deep south. Up until that point in time, you couldn't get that kind of development there. There was no offers to Nash to pay for his home security, to give bursaries to his children. Many others today would have taken those opportunities. As you would have seen others buy 25, 30 cars and all kinds of stuff. What they do with so many cars, God alone knows. But it is there, it has become a culture. I'm so happy that this man of integrity said no to all kinds of temptations that must have come his way. And that is what we need today, is the ability of those in public office to say no when those kinds of offers are made. Because as we all are aware today, it is the poorest of the poor who are impacted the most on this. So I want us to remember Nash and his integrity and his ethics as a public representative, and find ways of using his life as a teaching model for other public representatives today. And I think we will find ways of doing that. In conclusion, I just want to quote something that I came across. There is no gainsaying that corruption threatens to fell at the knees virtually everything we hold dear and precious in our hard-won constitutional order. It blatantly undermines the democratic ethos, the institutions of democracy, the rule of law, and the foundational values of our nascent constitutional project.
It fuels maladministration and public fraudulence and imperils the capacity of the state to fulfill its obligations to respect, protect, promote, and fulfill all the rights enshrined in the Bill of Rights. When corruption and organized crime flourish, sustainable development and economic growth are stunted, and in turn the stability and security of society is put at risk. It is Ignatius' honor that we take forward this fight against corruption, against whomever is implicated and involved in that. And I'm sure all of you will share and applaud and find your own way of taking forward that sense of ethics and integrity into tomorrow and for as long as this country requires it. Amelia, the children, comrades, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Comrade Sean, for those reflections. I think that it's well said about the life of Comrade Ignatius. Comrades, we're running a little bit behind time, so we're going to speed up a bit. I'm now going to call on Comrade Kathy Seifert, who's the Deputy Secretary of the Sophia Town Zone, to come and read a message on behalf of the Women's League. Comrade Judy Hermans was supposed to be here, but unfortunately she can't be here on person, and she's asked the comrade to read the message on her behalf. So over to you, Comrade Seifert.
Sorry about that. Good evening, Dumela, Sawubona, Goeienaand. Let me start off by greeting our Honorable Comrade Jesse. It is always such a pleasure to see you. The Honorable Mayor, Honorable Comrade Phoebe, and all the other dignitaries, Mr. Program Director. But to all of you sitting here tonight, let me say good evening, and let me read a message from the Women's League. I am actually very humbled and honored to represent the ANC Women's League in remembering the life and the times of our beloved Comrade Ignatius. And that is to reflect on the meaningful contribution and the work that the late comrade has done with selflessness, activism, and leadership throughout his life. Comrade Nash spent his entire youth fighting for all South Africans, for all of us. He fought the unchecked for the freedom of his people, under the banner of the ANC, SACP, MK, AZASU, SAICO, and even the UDM. He dedicated his entire life to serving his movement and the people of his country, which he dearly loved. Most importantly, the life of Comrade Nash signifies what a true cadre of the movement is, and I think we heard that over and over tonight. When he was deployed to serve in the Gauteng provincial government in 1994, Comrade Nash brought intellectual prowess, dynamic leadership, and excellence into the newly formed democratic government led by the ANC. These are the qualities he displayed in all his life, in all his work that he was doing in Gauteng. Most important aspect of his life is the legacy of a cadre of our movement, a cadre which we all should really follow and enhance. His commitment to the ANC was not defined by positions nor deployments. He remained committed and steadfast in advancing the struggle of the people in the country, the people in his neighborhood, the people in the city. And his life remained an example what a true cadre ought to be. Comrades, we live in times where comrades' loyalties to the organization is limited to certain positions of power, deployments in government, which has never been the case with Cader Nash. Upon leaving his role as MEC, Nash continued to serve the ANC in various capacities and displayed no acts of disgruntlement or entitlement out of subjected himself or to the revolution led by the ANC. Numerous of our comrades fell by the wayside and joined or formed political parties when recalled, redeployed, or not being elected back into positions, but not in the case of Cader Nash. He joined other leaders at Luthuli House, and we heard that being spoken about, and several of the movement, things of the movement he did while being employed there, with the utmost diligence, and brought a vibrant culture into the daily operations of the organization, and that at the headquarters in the Luthuli House. This signifies the servant leadership, humility, and the dedication towards the cause of building a non-racist, non-sexist, and a prosperous South Africa. May his life and his legacy inspire all of us to understand that being elected or appointed to lead in any structure of the movement or being deployed is not an entitlement, but it is an opportunity to serve the movement and to serve the people of the country at large. May his life inspire generations to come, and how a true cadre of the movement ought to be. An intellectual par excellence, that was what he was. A leader that never considered himself bigger than the movement and the struggle for a better South Africa. A strategist, way ahead of his time. As the Women's League, we'd like to celebrate the life of Comrade Ignatius Jacobs as an illustration of what it is to be a true cadre of the movement and the commitment of a leader of our people. The history of the ANC and the Alliance will never be complete without mentioning the name of Cader Nash. May he continue to rest in peace. And may his legacy remain with us. On that note, I want to thank you, but may I say to the family, our condolences once again, but his memory will live forever. I thank you.
Thank you very much for that message from the ANC Women's League, a very powerful message. Comrades, we're coming to the end of the section on the reflections before we will get the main input from Comrade Jesse Duarte. And we'll do that with a message, video message from Comrade Gaugello Legoro, who also served on the NEC of Psycho and the Youth League at Psycho with Comrade Ignatius Jacobs. Comrade Gaugello is unfortunately not able to be here in person. He is serving as the country's ambassador to Vietnam, and he recorded this message for us. So if you can have the message.
Good evening, comrades. Secretary General, J.C. Duarte, Comrade leaders in Gauteng Province, the region of Johannesburg, and Riverlea branch. It is a singular honor for me to be invited to a gathering to honor the memory of Comrade Nash, a comrade, and a friend. It is only proper when one of us has passed on to take time in an event like this to measure his worth and how he touched other people's lives through his contribution to the cause of humanity. It is a daunting task to narrate the life of Nash, and it's even so if you are still grieving the loss of a special person that Nash was to me. I have known Nash from the early 1980s, when our paths crossed in the early formative stages of the youth congresses throughout the country. After meeting in few such meetings, seminars, and conferences, we developed a relation that grew into a bond that was cemented by the tendency to find ourselves on the same side of political tendencies of the time. When the news were broken to me about your passing on, it was like facing a solitary moment, coming to terms with the reality that I have been blocking out of my subconscious. Losing you, Nash, is like losing a limb in one's body, which may heal over time, but will never be repaired. As comrades who shared a better part of our youthful days with you in study, we look upon time to ease the pain of losing you. We will continue to cherish the best of times we had with you in order to bear the loss. I have so many joyful memories of your friendship. Some were tense and risky moments, some bitter, some emotional, and some were sheer pleasure. Riverlea was my home, and Riverlea was your home. We enjoyed each other's company, both in work and in social encounters. You were a dependable player. You carried out your responsibilities with diligence. You were a good debater, outstanding in articulation of the fields of study. You were an all-rounder who mastered his role in the different pillars of our study. To us, your peers, we know and accept that your death has burdened us to take it upon ourselves to double our effort to do what you would have done if you were here. That is to fulfill the undertaking we pledged to our people in the Freedom Charter. We are also alive that as we mourn your passing on, those who went before you, like comrades Fossel Martel, Teacher Vanga, Elise Futel, Ephraim Mohali, Ephraim Mukwe, Itamuka, Alpha Ngatlani, Numisa Mkondro, await you in the hereafter. As we join this parade of these heroines and heroes of the young lions of Oliver Tambo, we remain and dedicate ourselves to redouble our effort to achieve the ideals which bound us together through the years of struggle. I thank you.
Now hand over to Comrade Patrick Voss that will introduce the DSU.
Thank you, Comrade Phoebe.
and I'm going to continue on that path of moving along. Safe to say, you have the DSG here, but the DSG is not just DSG when it comes to Ignatius or to Riverlea, because she is from here. Okay, no, they're from nuclear enforcement, but we have, she will tell you that this place she loves. Okay, she loves nuclear too. Actually, she loves the whole of South Africa. Before some people say, because if you are DSG, you can't just love, actually you can't just love those who just vote for you. The DSG of the ANC is to love everybody. And that is in the true spirit of the ANC, the true spirit of Ignatius Jacobs, because she knows Ignatius Jacobs when we were at our formative years, when we were just starting off, when we dabbled into black consciousness that she shared with us. So she started off as a black conscious person, but we always like to say we matured and we became non-racial people. Of course, that is never to undermine people like Malcolm X and Steve Biko. They were great human beings. But I just think it is within that context that together we grew, together we supported each other, together we were there sleeping in a car sometimes, a car that Jessie could just barely look out of, and she drove us all over the country with this car. Sometimes over pavements when we saw cops coming for us, and so on. On some occasions, even with guns and pamphlets, banned pamphlets and posters within the back of a car, etc. And so, yes, we stayed at the house. That house of us was an MK base. Ignatius's house was an MK base. 13 Flinders Street, where my mother-in-law lived, was an MK base. In extension, we established MK bases because we dared to imagine and to dream that this ANC victory will come forward, and it will come forward fast, and we will not be as slow as the time with the great Nelson Mandela. We wanted it now. Victory is certain within that context. And of course, you know that I'm saying that with respect. They're always aware that we need to do it. So when you look at Jessie, don't just look at Jessie just as the DSG in relation to Nash. It is a comrade, it's a friend, it is a mother, it is a counselor, it is somebody that has been there day in and day out to support her, to support Ignatius. Even on Christmas days and New Year's days and on Easter days, we will be out there working and developing structures, even on those days. So DSG, I have the honor to issue to the people, and please come forward and speak to us.
Amandla. Long live the undying spirit of Ignatius Jacobs. Long live. It's very difficult to know where to begin. So much has been said. But in early 1980s, my family moved from Nuclear to Riverlea. And I knew 3 families in the area. I knew Jardine very well because I had worked in his shop during my high school years to pay for my education, scrubbing floors. I knew the Garson family and the Cami family. And I also knew Ralph Peffer, who was quite an activist, but quite a stern leader who honestly believed that Riverlea belonged to him, and these young pipsqueaks were coming here to market. And then I met the Jacobs family. Let me say first I met Ignatius. Pearl brought Ignatius to my house about 3 weeks after we had unpacked. There were still boxes. Ignatius was on holiday at the time from university. Big afro, piercing eyes, magnetic smile. He stole my heart immediately. But what stole my heart was he marched straight to my bookshelf, unpacked a few books and said, I'm going to take these because I need to read them. And we talked about what he'd like to do. I didn't know him at all. I must tell you this. I'd not heard of him, but Bill brought him home, and that was good enough for me. Because Bill would not bring a person into my home that would create a problem for me in any way. So in 1979, I had already met with Masisulu. We talked. The idea was that I became part of a small unit of women. We would begin to form the strategy towards building provincial women's organizations throughout the country with the aim of relaunching the Federation of South African Women. That was my remit as one of 10 women that were recruited very cautiously by Albertina Sisulu. All of us were, let me say, women who came from activist families that she knew. And in those days, that is how the ANC recruited. They would find an activist family here and there, bring you in. They never said you were being recruited into the ANC, but somehow you knew that you were doing something a little bit different from the normal style of activist work. When I moved to Riverlea, Masisulu's advice was, look, you got to form a little group that you can work with. Actually, the fact of the matter is, you had to form a unit of 3 people. Comrade, you will remember that. 3, no more. So for me, Ignatius was, I set my eyes on him. I went to her about 4 months after I met him. We went back to school, we kept in touch. And I said, look, I think this is one of the people. And she said, fine. When you can, you need to just make sure that you introduce him to me. I just want to meet him. The old lady had an eye, she said. She knew, her heart knew. And the rest is frankly history, to be honest. Ignatius brought Patrick. Patrick was the 3rd arm of that group. Patrick brought, and Ignatius brought Connie. Connie is here. Can you just wave? There you go. They brought Donnie Madison, Stafford, Jackie Donkers from Riverlea Extension, all boys. There were no women that they knew then, I thought. But they were so dedicated to the task they had been given, and what we did was we started talking just about what we wanted to do in Riverlea. Nothing else. In Riverlea, we wanted to transform this community into a community that would begin to believe that you didn't have to be complacent, that you could make a change and you could make a difference. We were known as the Riverlea Group. Soon we began to make contact with people in Bosmont, Nuclear, Coronationville, people like Jesse Maluleka, Jesse Harvey, Cyril Turton, and we joined up with the anti-PC group to begin to work on breaking down apartheid reserve and their false elections, to break down the President's Council. That was our objective. But our undercover objective was ungovernable. That was our job, Comrade Deacon. We were instructed to make the country ungovernable. And let me tell you, I think we did a very good job. The Young Lions did a very, very good job to make this country ungovernable. Now, a little bit further, I need to tell you is that apart from building structures, because the important thing was to have people on the ground who thought like you and who would work with you. So the formation of COSAs, cycle structures, and small women's groups throughout the country was vitally important. That is like the core of building the next level of creating under government. But I just have to tell you this anecdote. It's very difficult to explain. Some would disappear because my line of authority was Masisulu, Ray Alexander in Botswana, so I'd have to travel all the way to Botswana, meet Auntie Ray, or meet Ruth Bompati, or meet Gertrude Shope, and I could not explain to them where I was. So there was suspicion in the group, you see, because I wasn't supposed to tell them who my connections were. Neither were they supposed to say who they were connected to. All we knew that we each had our own instructions to follow. But I remember Ignatius saying to me one day, you know, Jesse, you sometimes we're not able to reach you, and that's not okay. And this group needs to know everything about each other. And I could not really explain, to be honest with you, and I never did. I continued with the work. But you see, Nash is so passionate that everybody was usurped into his thinking. There was a crèche opposite my house. I don't know how these guys got it right, but we owned that crèche. Raiko's office was in the office of that crèche, Lawrence, right opposite my house. I never questioned it, except that I was also given a key because one of my legends was I needed to give counseling to families. I was a trained family life counselor. So my legend was, you counsel families who are in distress. That was fine with me. We did that. It was also a way of talking to the community about where we could go. We formed a clinic together with the Health Workers Association in Riverlea Extension because old people had to take a taxi or a bus or walk to Coronationville Hospital to get their treatment. So our idea was, no, let's get doctors that can volunteer and come to our community and administer medicine here, and that happened. We also formed a little crèche which Mrs. Flask, Nicolette Flask ran in Riverlea Extension. Nobody ever paid any money for that crèche. It was a struggle. Because the parents who brought their children to that crèche were dirt poor. So we had to find money for the food, for the playthings, and so on. It's not so easy. And very often we simply took our own money and gave it to Nicolette and said, here is what you will run with. We also were able to interlocute with the sports fraternity in this community. What I found so amazing was this club called Goretti. Is it Goretti or Goretti? Goretti. You see, all of them played for this club. All of them. But it was so amazing to understand that through the influence of Nash in the Catholic Church and Patrick in the Catholic Church, they were able to recruit people through Goretti to come to the Riverlea, to Raiko. The only person Ignatius ever introduced me to was Amelia. She was the biggest secret in our lives. We knew of Aunt Amelia, we never set eyes on her, we never met her. She was very special. And he once said to us, you cannot collectivize our love lives. So Ignatius also had, he said, don't collectivize our love lives, And Ignatius also assisted us to meet others. One day, Donnie Madison pitches up at my house. I don't know this person from a bar or so. He says, I'm Donnie Madison, I'm from the Eastern Cape. Ignatius sent me. I said, okay. It turns out he needed a place to hide and stay. So he stayed with me for a night or two, and then I found him a spot at the hostel next to Baragwana. Yeah, drove him there, handed him over to Ed Motshega, and said, here's another young person that needs to stay here. She didn't ask questions. Few weeks, months later, Mikey could see pictures up at my house. He says, I'm from the Western Cape. Ignatius sent me. Mikey could see her, needs a place to stay, and we organized. Mikey was a challenge because my brother Zane and Mikey wanted to go into exile, Deacon. They wanted to be trained there when we were doing the training here. And we were saying to people, we must build structures. These two wanted to go to Lusaka. I arranged for them to go to Lusaka through the Zambian Council of Churches. They go for a conference and they don't want to come. It's a crisis. But I want to tell you what struck me about Nash was he had read so many things. So when Lawrence says he was 13 years old when he began, he could not wait for the DLB to arrive, for the material from wherever it came from the ANC, to go and read and to share. The one little thing we would get would be torn and broken by the time it came back home, because it had to come back so that we were sure it wasn't given somewhere to the security police. It had to come back where it originated from. But he could never wait. He was impatient. But I want to tell you, you see, Ignatius believed in development. He believed so thoroughly that we could develop this country into something that would be a world-class place for all its people. He thoroughly, he studied development. He made sure that he understood the rudiments of what it meant to be a developmental activist, which meant that you serve the people and you do nothing beyond them. You become that change agent. And of course it meant hard work. And let me tell you, it meant going against very orthodox thinking in the ANC. We have to tell you that. We had to go against orthodox thinking in the ANC. I was the only one who was able to attend the UDF General Council, but I never went without instructions. Let me also advise you that before the General Council happened, the three of us would sit and they would say, listen, you must get up and say 1, 2, 3, 4. I said, yes, but I represent the women there. They say, never mind that. This is what we need to happen now. We need to see that we understand what's happening in education, not on a shallow level, but very deeply. Ignatius taught at Luthuli School, by the way. You didn't say that. He taught there, and at the same time did all the things Deacon wanted him to do. Never knew how he got that right, because he would have to disappear for days on end, Deacon, to go and carry on the missions in Pretoria that he had to do. But he was very clear about one thing. We do not back down on development. We do not back down on non-racialism. We fight tooth and nail against tribalism. We fight tooth and nail against what we called leadership cults. We did have them, by the way, right here. We saw the emergence of young people with great ambition who all they wanted to do was be the leader, but not understand what they were leading. And Nash was very clear about that. You fight the leadership cult perspective so that people lead who understand what they're leading, not just to lead for the sake of leading. So it was building structures, Psycho, Fetroye, the Transvaal, COSAS. Those were the three primary structures that we got involved in. But it was also building campaigns based on the needs of the people. That's a very different perspective to building a campaign that is making somebody popular. We were not popular, let me tell you right from the start. You know what? We were popular with the poor, but we struggled with the people living in here on this side of the line. But we were very popular in Riverlea Extension. Because on this side of the line, people had running water, They had electricity. They didn't have the difficulties that the people in Riverlea Extension had. And they thought we had come to unbalance this quiet place that our Piffer had brought them to, and which really belonged very much to him, and where the Catholic Church had dominance, even though there were other churches in the area. It was a big struggle. And Ignatius was wonderful as a diplomat. He undid that struggle very quickly and showed people that we could assist no matter which class you belong to. We could work with you. So we had to work through a number of issues like that in those years. We also had to struggle with ourselves, because the struggle with yourself is the greatest struggle of a revolutionary. Whether you are going to go in all the way, or whether you're going to go in halfway, or whether you're only going to allow yourself to become popular and then you dump the ANC along the way somewhere and move off somewhere else. And blame the ANC for all the shortcomings that belong to all of us in society. But there are shortcomings that we need to correct. We do not want corruption in our society. We do not want people who go and steal and they are a member of the ANC, because the ANC does not send people to take money from anybody. But at the same time, we also believe in a just society. We believe that justice is an important matter in our society, and it should not have eyes. There shouldn't be a perspective that says, you are guilty because I say so. And you are guilty because I say so, because 10 other people say so on Twitter. You can only be really guilty if you are properly tested in a court of law. This business of pointing fingers is creating a great deal of problem for us in the ANC. And sometimes people point fingers at people they want to get rid of from the structures. Not because that person has done anything seriously wrong. And let me tell you, the pain of Ignatius was that story that Sean tells you about, the rumors that were spread about him when he was embassy for transport. Very painful. Because Ignatius wouldn't take anything for himself from anybody. He gave everything he had, Amelia. You know, he would get his salary and he would give to everybody that needed whatever else they needed. We all had to do that. Give what we earned, wherever we were working. It was painful for him to be accused in that manner. But I'll tell you, in the latter days, what was even more painful was for some people to accuse him of impropriety with regard to some airport. Got into the newspapers, some airport belonging to the Denel property. We sat down, we talked about that, and his attitude was, I'm not going to fight this. It's a battle of politics. I'm not interested. Right now, we have to develop what we're doing. Again, we were running an election in the ANC when that story emerged. And again, Ignatius was superb in providing strategic direction for that election as well as our general manager. He was there before we began. Ignatius understood that we cannot have a South Africa where the structure of the economy is not correct. Now, there are people who wear a t-shirt called Radical Economic Transformation, and they form little branches called RET branch. There's no such nonsense. That is absolute rubbish. Radical Economic Transformation is a core value of the African National Congress. Without it, we will not transform the economy of this country, which means that we've got to challenge the status quo, Comrade Deacon. We've got to challenge monopoly capital. We've got to be able to say that we are not the cheap labor of the apartheid regime. And the foolishness that we sometimes go through is to believe, Comrade Jeff, that so-called colored people benefited from apartheid. Again, I say, and Ignatius would say the same, that is absolute rubbish. Because you don't see the levels of poverty that so-called colored people live on now, because they never benefited from anything. And as a consequence, I got very shocked. The first time I met some branch members here who said, yeah, but those people are developed. How are they developed? And therefore not be in the leadership. Again, I say to you with respect, that is a lot of rubbish. It is not the ANC who is telling you that. It is coming out of your own skewed head space that you make up the story that doesn't belong in the African National Congress, and the marginalization of people is the consequence of that skewed thinking. It's not the thinking of the ANC. It is the thinking of incorrect individuals in the ANC. And one day, they will have to understand that the space for them is zero. Racism has no place in the ANC. Neither has tribalism. Let me tell you that. The reason the ANC was formed was to break down tribalism and racism. You know, one of the discussions we had with Ignatius was this thing in the Western Cape that was what the Cape Province was a labor preference area for colored people. So we did a study on the value. What is that labor that those so-called colored people were doing in the Western Cape? What was it? Farm work and domestic work in the main. 2 jobs, farm work and domestic work. Yeah? And then there were a number of people who got skills, like a few skills as master builders, never working for themselves, but working for property developers. So that myth has to be smashed. And how are they paid? With the dot system on the farms. So what is the preference there? But certain death due to alcohol poisoning and children with alcohol fetal syndrome. That is the privilege that was given to the people who lived and are from the Western Cape. We should not be so proud and say that we are not black, we are colored. It is clear. In our time and in the 80s, we rejected this term colored. I do still reject it. I'm a proud African woman, and I'm proud to say so. My friend Priscilla Jana was buried a few days ago, and her daughter, Tina, got up and said, my mother is a beautiful African woman who wears a sari. You know, in that moment, the first time I felt the loss of that giant of a woman was a people's way. I thought, if only we understood as simply as that Priscilla Jana was not an Indian. She was an African woman who wore a sari. And you see, Ignatius would come and teach this, and we would not hear you. Constantly at the Riverlea Hall, we would talk about non-racialism. And there would always be a hand at the back of the wall who would call us kafir booties. I want to say this to you. We in this community, in Eldorado Park, in Enedale, in Nuclear, in Bosmont, and elsewhere, we need to take charge of our lives and not be led by rhetoric and populism. Because this is our country. foreigners in this country. And therefore, this whole idea of the constant, we are not wanted, is a wrong perspective. And Ignatius would have told us that. We fought, comrades and friends, we fought for that space. Hard. We spoke up against it. In the conservative areas where the ANC was conservative, don't believe that everybody in the ANC walked into the ANC with non-racialism emblazoned in their heads and in their hearts. No, it's been a long struggle. And if we give up on that struggle, we are giving up on our revolutionary duty. And that was what Ignatius was, a revolutionary. He really didn't care about wealth or fame or anything that didn't give the people something in return. He cared about change, making that change. And I would say, yes, I would also equate him with a Che Guevara. I would. A very educated man who did not care about anything else other than making life better for the people. Just a little anecdote. I remember that when Nash had done all his, finished all his studies, he then said, you know, to Patrick and I, you know, comrades, I must do a PhD. Do you remember that night? So we look at him and we say, Nash, as jy 'n PhD gaan doen, dan gaan nie werk doen. He says, no, but you know, we need PhDs, man. You know, we also have to have, Donnie's a PhD, you know, you went that way. But we argue with him that night and we say, no, you can go and do this PhD, but we need you to tell us how you're going to manage the work on the ground. The PhD never came because Nash thought a lot about it and decided, no, the work on the ground must be done first. I want to say this to you. Those who say that there was no sacrifice must think again. We had no youth. None. We didn't know discotheques and jolling around and the things that young people do. We knew the revolution and the struggle. And the sacrifice we made was our education. So that others could be educated. I am not regretting that. Ignatius did not regret it. And I think Patrick does not regret it. I hope Conrad, I know, went ahead and he got, maybe he got that PhD. But we were ambitious for what? We were ambitious for change, my comrades. We were hungry for change. Even when they came and occupied Riverlea with the army, a day I will not forget. So we weaponized, Deacon. We are scared. We were scared. You know, we were not so martyrish. Well, bam! These army people had big guns. You gave us Makarovs, my colleague. I think we had one AK in the whole area. And little small Makarov like this, you know. And what we said was, today we will fight, and if we die, so be it. But these Boers are not going to kill the people of Riverlea. And I don't know what happened that day. They stayed for an hour or two, and they left. And I must tell you, we were grateful that they left. And we were happy that nobody was shot and that we didn't have to do any shooting. It's not a nice thing to think about. Now, I want to mention one last thing that Ignatius believed in quite a great deal. He did believe that a thriving economy in a national democratic society requires an efficient market, which does not have racial and gender discrimination. That comes from the strategy and tactics of the ANC. But today, we find that we are making choices that might not be the best choices for us. We are making choices that favor the business community more than it favors the working classes. All of them, because the middle class is part of the working class. And so we're going to struggle to create jobs, because there's no capitalist in their right mind that goes into business to create jobs and have less profit. So there is a great deal of need to think differently one more time. To go back to the thinking we had in Ready to Govern, Comrade Deacon and others. We wrote Ready to Govern with the idea that we would change the structure of this economy. We haven't done that. We've done many other great things in this country, but we haven't changed the structure of the economy. And having the right to vote is not enough anymore for our people. It's not enough. It has to be much, much more than just freedom to move and live where you want to live. There must be jobs. There must be a right to good education. It broke my heart a few weeks ago when there was a graduation at Wits University. I looked at who was graduating. There was not a single child who looked like a child who comes from Riverlea, Bosmont or Nuclear in that graduating class. So I want to say it is time to recommit, because the struggle has to be fought by us. No one else is going to do this. No one else is capable of doing it except us, the activists of the ANC. We have to get back to the schools in our communities, to encourage young people to go as far as they can and to take them beyond, so that they are not disillusioned by not going on to universities. That is something we can do in his name, in the name of this revolutionary who thoroughly believed in education as the way forward for every human being to survive and to be better. I want the last message to us. You know, this empowerment center was Ignatius's idea. It was thoroughly debated and discussed by the collective and what would be done here. The idea was to have a place where young people could develop their skills. A place where they could move away from the drugs, and if they wanted to get into drama and singing and other things, and be a disco tech operator, or I don't know what else, anything else other than nothing. This place was going to be that hub. Well, it isn't that hub. Just like Comrade Mayor, the swimming pool in our areas are no longer working. I sent you a picture. I do that, by the way. The poor mayor is gedaan saam met my man. Die man wil nie my boodskappe vat nie. Maar hy kan nie, dit is die DSG, hy moet dit vat. Ja. My last message to him was, the swimming pool for the children of the community. You know, there's a tennis court that's dilapidated. We don't have playing fields for the playgrounds here in our community. In extension, the children get knocked over by cars because they run over a busy street to come to this side to play in a park, because there isn't a real park on the other side. The houses are broken in extension. Year after year after year, we hear the same story from the councillors, whether they are ANC councillors or DA councillors. Those houses don't get fixed. We want representation that talks to the issues of the people, like we did with the campaigns in the 1980s, is to have people who understand, Kathy Seafood, what our people need. Not people who are going to give us a thesis about what the people need, because we know the problem. Give us the solution now. And that is what we must demand. We are docile. We are not activist citizens. Kyk, daai man van Inaugural kyk my. Hy moet net nie weer beklei met asseblief ek vra baie mooi. Thanks, Comrade, very very much, my comrade. I love you to bits, you know that. But I'm telling you, if we don't street fight for the rights of the people, no one else is going to do it. We have to street fight. I'm ready to say that because the ANC-led government is my ANC-led government. And I don't want a councillor who's not going to do the job, who comes only because they need a job. Ons wil nie doen die werk of stay by die huis. So there's an election here. There is an election here in a few days' time. Please, let's get the people to vote for DA. I'm asking you, because you keep asking them to vote and they vote DA. And niks gaan aan nie met die DA aan nie. But now there's something called Patriotic Front. Alliance, Patriotic Alliance. Comrades, you cannot come here and sit in a lecture of Ignatius Jacobs and not feel that you must go out and mobilize this community for the ANC. This was one of the hubs of the ANC in its underground heyday. Ne? And we developed many people here. Where are they today? Sitting at home. Time to roll up the sleeves, do the work, make sure we get the community back together. Let's not break this community any longer. We don't have that right. Let's get some of these older people who lecture us. I love Luthuli for one thing, Deacon. You could go to a house and some toppy will lecture you for an hour, my friend, about anything and everything, and you sit, you don't dare to leave. Because if you leave, you are lost. I love this community because there's wisdom. There are many wise people here. They don't have PhDs and degrees, but they have wisdom. Can we get them back to be the wisdom of the ANC? And let's say to the youth, you know, you are going to lead. The country will be yours to lead one day. But you know what? You cannot lead without understanding the rudimentaries of leadership and struggles of the people. You cannot wake up one day and say, I'm going to be a leader. Leaders are developed. Ignatius was developed. Patrick was developed. Conrad was developed. The comrades here were taught what it meant to lead the community, but not to force them into anything they didn't want. I'm telling you now, accept this as the gospel truth. I'm not a religious person. Oh, by the way, I must tell you, Ignatius tried very hard. Shame. He used to say to me on Easter weekend, come with us to the church, man. People must just see you there. You know, they must just see that Jesse gaan kerk toe. It never, I never went. But I believed, as they believed, that you have a right to a religion of your choice and no one must stand in your way or force you into any other direction that you don't want to go. So I want to leave you with an Ignatius message. Nothing changes unless you change it. Nothing will change unless you want it to change. Gender-based violence will not go away until we all want it to go away. Gender-based violence and child abuse will not change unless each one of us commit to sorting it out in the street where we live, in the house where we live, in the church where we live, and in the business community where it happens every day. It will not change. We can have slogans, but patriarchy does not kill itself. It is killed by us, and that is our task now. Amandla.
Yeah, thank you, Comrades and Amanda, dear Amanda. So, comrades, we are almost there, not long to go. Getting call from the DSG. People, but everybody must storm the ANC. Storm the ANC in the branches, storm it in the zones, storm it in the regions, in the provinces, storm the National Executive Committee of the ANC. Well, not go fight, become members of those things. Organize, build, and strengthen the ANC so that we change the ANC to end slave wages, to end unemployment, and to deal with all those community issues she was talking about. Well, there's one thing before I call the mayor here that she forgot to say. You will note that in Riverlea, we actually broke the back of gangsters here. There were gangsters operating here and they were dominant at one stage. But we went and worked amongst them, whether it was the Hair Devils or the Colonial Kids, etc. What we did, well, she and Ignatius, not me, they even smoked ganja with them to show them they are part of them. We are part of them. But and those guys believed in us and they succumbed. And they actually gave it up, something the churches could not do. Not that I'm saying the churches should not continue to do that, but when we think of Ignatius, it's all those little things. Building the civic movement, building a resource center. Actually, Jess, you did not talk about the newspaper. We had Cardface, and it was in there. Yes. Okay, Jobs can't hear you.
Goodness me, and I work with him at Luthuli House. He's going to block my entry. We formed a newspaper called Riverlea, which was a powerful tool that actually told the stories of the local people in the area. But we always carried a message from the ANC in Riverlea, in our own way. Riverlea had the colors of the ANC with one red stripe, so that, you know, it wasn't so obviously an ANC newspaper. And we handed it out to people, and what was one? The business community started asking if they could advertise in Riverlea. So that newspaper could have grown had we wanted it to. But Donovan Kruti and Sean van Wyk, Sean is the brother of Chris van Wyk and Nicolette, plus their brother, they were the brains behind that. So we had little pockets of people doing wonderful things. We still can do that. Amanda.
Okay, Jobs, I can see you are smiling again. You were like down-faced and everything. I cannot let Jobs not be acknowledged. So, but don't worry, Jobs. And don't worry, Gapes, I can see you are here. That guy Jess that likes to shut down Gauteng. Continue to shut down Gauteng, but don't forget, do it in the name with a vehicle that can change lives. And there's only one vehicle, and that is the ANC vehicle that can change it. So Gapes, storm the ANC with us and become a member. So now, Jesse was putting a challenge to the mayor, but this mayor, he knows colored townships very well. He's been living in colored townships for a long time, as Lawrence was pointing out there. This mayor, he gets called out, him and Tanya, I think Tanya's at the back there, they get called out to come and fix things, even if they are small, even if they are big, they are here all the time and they responded. And so, Mr. Mayor, we like the idea that you are a people's mayor, because the ANC should and is a people's organization. So, Mr. Mayor, come and tell us.
Amandla. Long live the African National Congress, long live. Long live the entire spirit of Comrade Ignatius Jacobs, long live. Long live. It's a bit limiting to introduce as a mayor because I would have worn a suit. So I went home to change. But anyway, I will invoke the other head of being a chairperson of the ANC in Greater Johannesburg region, also a mayor. Also a mayor. Let me pass my greetings to the family, my neighbors in Yede, DSG. Quite impressive that after so many years, they still fire in the belly. Very fiery, Jesse Duarte. Still exists. Comrade Lawrence and the rest of the Jacobs family, members of the NEC present, members of the RSC, I see Comrade Tanya at the back. Special greetings to Pastor Comrade Deacon Mate, once fiery youth leader, military man, but still as fiery as on the pulpit. I saw he took the Bible and put it aside and started contextual theology. Theology in the context of the military. And some of the things they did to get us here. Former Psycho and ANC youth league leaders, Phoebe, former SG of the ANC Youth League, former MPLs, I saw Rastu, Bob, I saw them in the Gauteng legislature, Richard Bolton, Executive Director of the Mental Foundation, leadership of the Zone 6 Zone, the Greater Sophia Town Zone, members and leadership of JB Max Branch 168, which is going to invite HDSG, and the candidate is Elizabeth Williams, right there at the back. I wanted to stand so that we know the person you're talking about. The councillor you're describing, she knows she must be one and she will be one when we win on the 11th of March. 2020. November. Hey, I think it's next year. We can't postpone it. It was supposed to be in March and it was postponed because of Corona. It's now in November. In a book titled Laughter and Forgetting, a Czechoslovakian writer, Milan Kundera, says, the struggle of men, and I suppose struggle of women against power, is a struggle of memory against forgetting. Lest we forget. Lest we forget the struggles of our people in Riverlea, in Soweto, in Tanzania, in Pontehevel. Lest we forget. Lest we forget the sacrifice of men and women throughout the generations, from the colonial wars to different generations, who did everything in their power to get us here. Lest we forget the generations of young people who sacrificed life and limb to liberate this country, but selfishly, Comrade Deacon, lest we forget the sacrifice of the Young Lions generation. And I call them the generation that was in the final push in the 80s, leading us to the breakthrough of 1990. Long live the Young Lions, long live. So we are in that struggle, the struggle of memory against forgetting. I really appreciate this opportunity to be part of this event, to immortalize the memory of Comrade Ignatius Jacobs, Nash the communist, Nash the revolutionary, Ignatius the activist, the organizer, Nash the theoretician, the public servant, the family man, and most of all, I know my big friend will be happy, Nesh the Bacanera. Very active in the liberation for his people, or liberation of his people, a deep love for Riverlea, and a deep love for South Africa. There was a time, as an anecdote, he was saying to me, I need to join him in some shape in Riverlea. If you want to know the real Shebi, come with me to Riverlea. He described it, and I realized from the description that I am not going there. I know, just from the description, I made a decision that I am not joining him on that Friday. But it's also true that Nesh was active and very active in the construction of the new South Africa. From its humble beginnings in 1994, Nesh spent no energy in ensuring that the Gauteng province is a much better place for us to live. Now, what is left in Riverlea is that memory that I think we need to reignite. It's a calling that we need to get Riverlea to where it was in terms of activism. We need to get the commitment of young people, the commitment of those with wisdom at DSG, to raise Riverlea to its former glory. I do believe in non-racialism. We've had a conversation with Comrade Cham around the death of non-racialism, especially in the AIDS. We had a conversation with the DSG. And what we need to do as this current generation of leaders to reignite that spirit of non-racialism. The ANC, as we see it today, is a non-racial organization of Africans. Full of Africans, but calling itself non-racial. We have to have a conversation and to change it. I do agree, DSG, that the democratic government did not do well in the so-called colored areas. Not do well in Riverlea, not do well in Newland, not do well in NRD, not do well in Inaugural Park. We did not do well in Boston. It's time that we change that. DSG is correct. If any of my messages, WhatsApp messages in the morning, has more messages and pictures, it's from a certain Jesse Duarte. And truly so, it's a challenge that this government of Johannesburg, by yours truly, must do something in reviving the memory of Ignatius Jacobs. I'm not saying this because there's a by-election coming. We're saying this because ourselves and the Premier have admitted so, that it's time that when we say our people, we mean really our people. Every South African is our people, especially part of the motive forces, blacks in general, Africans in particular, especially, and including those who are Africans themselves. So we need to do something in those areas. They should not be forgotten. They will not be forgotten. And it's a pledge we make today that we need to change the trajectory of our development. So Riverlea, Ward 68, we come in. I can tell you where we'll start. We'll start in Sun Street. I even know the street. Where it floods, whenever it rains. That's where we start. I know that street, Sun. But we have to do something. A former swimming pool must be a swimming pool. A former park must be and that's the ANC chair telling the mayor what to do. The ANC chair is instructing the mayor to do something. Because the strategic power lies with the African National Congress. The center of power, strategic center of power. So whenever the mayor gets confused, he must consult the chair. And the chair is never confused, it's very clear of what we need to do. We need to build a new Riverlea. It can't end with you. And then we romanticize about the 80s and the early 90s. It's actually a problem, it's actually a weakness that we have not built a new Riverlea. We just point fingers. There's a new objective now, there's a new challenge now, and the challenge there is to ensure that we build a better life for all. So Comrade Patrick Glass, Comrade Jesse Duarte, and other comrades, we need to build the next cohort of the Riverlea. Whether it's a dancing club or it's a music club, but there can be politics in that music club. We need to build it. That's why there's an empowerment center here. We need to keep the young people active. They need to be involved in community projects and build a newspaper. I forgot the name you said. Rag Vase. I don't know what you call it now. Maybe you have a fancier name that can resonate with Instagram. I don't think Rag Vase can do Instagram. Rag Vase. No, it will be rejected by Insta. It needs to be modern and modernize the names and modernize even the colors. They can be black, green, and gold, but it will be nice. No red this time. Openly black, green, and gold. No red this time. So I think the challenge is raised by Comrade Jesse that we need some unorthodox thinking to get ourselves out of the rut that we are in. We cannot do more of the same and expect different results. We need to do something different. And because Comrade Ignatius was a leader in that unorthodox thinking, it's no more. We need to produce others. We need to challenge ourselves. Jesse Tony Madison, you need to challenge ourselves. Being from Oxford, you can still send, there's a new challenge. Madison. And challenge us to move further. And I agree we need to defeat tribalism. It's rearing its ugly head. Regionalism is rearing its ugly head in the AIDS. It needs to be defeated, including the advent of leadership cults. Supreme leader. In Joburg, we are in coalition. Coalitions are not very nice. One of the parties we're in coalition with, its leader calls himself a supreme leader. There's no democracy. Now it goes against the very grain and the tenets of what the ANC stands for. But we find ourselves in that point. Which is why Elizabeth Williams must win so that we can increase our numbers. And less coalition parties. This resignation here was engineered by us. It did not come. And he said from heaven, and then I see the way you're looking at me. I would say something very wrong. But it did not come, it was not man. It did not come from heaven. It was engineered, of course, with the help of the Almighty. He resigned. So we have to cash in on the political work we've been doing. We did the same in Land South. We did the same in Ward 9 in Land Central. Engineered those resignations from the Democratic Alliance. But we have to cash in and make these votes. We have to look at ourselves in the mirror, especially the young ones, and say, I want to be Ignatius Jacobs. I want to build structures. I want to build COSAS. I want to build SASCO because he built SASCO. I want to build the Youth League because he built cyber. I want in my community to form a united front with NGOs, FBOs in the community to fight crime. I want to be the united front. I want the ANC to be strong. I want to respond to the needs of the people. I have a democratic government backing us. Comrades, let's unite to fight all the ills Comrade Sean Bolton was talking about. Let's defeat corruption. Let's defeat populism. Let's ensure that we change the modes of production. We don't eat and chisanyamas and all the consumption-based economic activities. We build factories. We build industrialists. Let's change the structure of the economy. It won't be easy. Capital will fight back. Capital will go on strike. Capital will expatriate their money. But let's rebuild this economy to be a different economy from the one we know. Last thing I want to say before the thank yous is that parties who organize around colored nationalism, like the Patriotic Alliance, I mean, their leader comes to me and says, so I pretend as if I don't understand Afrikaans and say, please translate. Then he says, the colored people do not like the ANC. We want to prove him wrong. And we want to prove him wrong even here in Ward 68, where he's campaigning in an unorthodox manner, effectively making promises he knows he can't keep for votes. Let's all go out, especially in the two stations where we lose Comrade Jason. I'm told at the right center we lose very badly, and I'm told that's your area. We need to win there. We need to win Bellarmine Hospitals. Let's not only win in Pennyville, let's win inside Riverlea and show them that every South African loves the African National Congress. Every South African loves it. And we say so because Ignatius Jacobs has lived amongst us. He has been a Nash in our lives. That's why we know that. The organizers of this event, I salute you. Let's keep the memory of Comrade Ignatius very much high in our minds. Let's ensure that all the generations to come will know that they once lived Ignatius Jacobs. Let's not forget the struggles, the contributions made. And we tend to have one memorial inaugural. We've done so with Comrade Kodi Mapele. We have an inaugural, we have an, it's 2 years later. If not, then a second one. Let's have this one every year. Focusing on different topics. Focusing on different topics that build society. That build Riverlea, that build Osu, that build energy, that build Soweto and Alexander. So it's a challenge for Riverlea. Let's have it in Ponte Haven, let's have it in Richards Plain. Let Ignatius' name be known in Bush, west of the Western Cape. So the alumni of the University of Western Cape, some of them are here. It's your duty to go back there and talk about Ignatius Jacobs. A push. Co-program directors, thank you very much for the opportunity. I know we will work together to fix and revitalize Riverlea. But one thing is for sure, nothing about the community of Riverlea is out there. It must be part of the development. So let's go down. It's with the people. Will be there. I've already. You know how painful it is for people to talk about APM down. And it's not that it wasn't good, it's because he left. The ANC is your home. There's only one home for us. The only one home for South Africans is the glorious movement of the people, the African National Congress. Viva ANC, viva. Viva. Long live the African National Congress, long live. Long live the movement of our people, the ANC, long live. Manda. All power. All power. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Comrade Mayor or Comrade Chair, whatever you're happy. We are almost there. I just see Kenny has disappeared. He doesn't like this stage. He likes to do the work. So he asked me nicely just to thank people. But just before that, I didn't want to sabotage the mayor. That's why I'm mentioning it after that, after he spoke. And there's two things, Mr. Mayor. One, this must become the Ignatius Jacobs, the Ignatius Patrick Jacobs Empowerment Center. I wonder why I say Patrick. Okay. Hey, this street down here last year, you claimed that Pirates did wonders here, and Ignatius was a good Pirates fan, and it cuts through Luthuli. We will name this the Ignatius Jacobs Drive or Avenue. So that is the challenge that we are putting to the mayor. And so I am saying, anybody opposed to that, please put up your hand. Nobody. Anybody in support of that? Yes. Mr. Mayor, resolution passed. There you go. Resolution passed. That's what you wanted. That's what we will do. So now, what I want to do at this stage is firstly, my dear Amelia and family, thank you for giving us this wonderful human being called Ignatius Jacobs. Thank you, and thank you for that again. You are a star for doing that to us. But of course, this man comes from Mr. and Mrs. Jacobs, Auntie Maggie and baby, as Lawrence was saying to us, with, I don't know what these Catholic people were doing, but there were no TVs. They're having all these kids there, etc. But we want to thank them as well. So let's thank these Jacobs. We want to thank Worcester, maybe a lot as well. But in particular, we want to thank this Riverlea community for giving us a human being like Ignatius Jacobs. So thank you, Riverlea, for giving us Ignatius Jacobs. We want to especially thank the ANC and the ANC Alliance for formulating this man into the revolutionary, the strategic thinker, the politically mature cadre. And we want to thank the ANC for giving us this product of a human being. So let's thank the ANC Alliance for that. Viva ANC, viva. And we heard what Sean said, Sean said what this man was all about. And that is because he came from the ANC. And we are saying to all ANC members, please follow that legacy, follow in that footsteps. Like we say, follow in the footsteps of Jesus, also follow in the footsteps of Ignatius Jacobs, that he has walked. So it is so important that we must fix this ANC because it's the vehicle, the only vehicle for change to taking us to that ideal society that we want. I also want to thank the organizers of this event, Kenny, Cabello, Phoebe, Vincent, Lohens, Dobbs. Don't see Dobbs, I don't forget you. So we thank you, Kusa, who is not here. We want to thank Tabu, Becky. They all participated in making this event a reality. And so let us give those organizers a big, big thank you. And so, comrades, I also want to thank all those people that spoke here today. And they're from Sean, to Deacon, to Lawrence, to the Women's League that came and given input here, Phoebe that gave an input here. I hope I have not missed anything, but DSG, particularly to you, to motivate us to redouble our efforts to become very much active in this organization. Whether you are in the public service, well, you can't quite be there. You must toe the line and be disciplined. But at home, please be active there. Wherever you are, let us redouble our efforts, energize this movement like we know it, like what Mandela did, what Tambo did, what Sisulu did, what Governor Mbeki did. All those people that played such a big role, let us be like that. And as Jesse was saying, like Winnie Mandela did, 2 o'clock in the morning, in the squatter camp, if there's a fire or a flood, she's there. Let us become those type of foot soldiers in dealing with all those people. Those people who went to the island as young people. We think of Kachada, who was a young boy when he ended up on the island, a teenager. We cannot forget people like this. Let us not betray the memory in what they were doing. So comrades, in particular, I want to thank you to come here tonight to join us. And there are drinks and eats there, so please join us. And we want to say, Amba Katla Umponto, Amba Katla to Ignatius Jacobs. Go well, my friend. Lawrence, you are not finished yet. Okay, you are just saying?
Sorry, I need to do this because I need to acknowledge the mayor on something he did. So, I've heard some people saying, what are the ANC doing for our brother? And I want to say to people so that people can understand, this is a mayor who's action-oriented. He phoned me, he made an offer to bury our brother at Heroes Acres. And I want to acknowledge that from the Jeff. And as a family, because of the humble person he is, he said, that's not who he was. He's not that person, like everyone here mentioned. He did not want to be the limelight, but you made us that offer. And we want to say thank you to you.
Thanks, Rob, and thank you, Mr. Mayor. Continue to be a people's mayor. It's the only way that you should survive in the world, by being a people's leader. Be a people's leader. So you heard what Jesse was saying, and you heard what Paul Fellow was saying there, that we were always having battles and fights. What type of democracy we want? And clearly, we do not want a bourgeois democracy, we want a people's democracy. And that is what we want. So, Amandla to a people's democracy. Thank you guys, and thanks for joining us.